Hello and welcome to today's podcast. This one is about selling, and we've got John Cunningham online. Welcome, John.
Hi, Richard.
I'm not going to introduce John as far as what he does. We'll get to a question later on that will cover that. But John, let's just first start with the obvious question, seeing as we're talking about selling. The word sales often scares people, doesn't it? Why do you think that is?
I think it scares some people. I think there's probably another few set of negative emotions that it brings out in different people. And I think it's driven by perception. I think it's driven by a perception of what sales means rather than what it should mean. So I think some people are, I think certainly in the UK anyway, selling is seen as something that is done to you by somebody rather than a collaborative process. And I think lots of things like targets and practices that take place mean that people behave in ways that really aren't necessarily conducive to good relationships sometimes in the world of sales.
Well, I think that's putting it mildly, yes. I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, this leads me on to the second question, though. I mean, where do you think most businesses go wrong?
In terms of sales, where do most businesses go wrong?
Yes, well, I mean, obviously, that when you're dealing with a sales rep of sorts, whether it be someone cold calling you or through some kind of social media or something, you're dealing with someone who's been trained and shown what to do. So where are the businesses going wrong when they're actually sitting down planning this stuff?
I think it depends on your perspective. From my perspective, I think that very often there's, and from what I see, and I'm not saying all organisations are like this, so various caveats, but I think a lot of organisations don't necessarily think about the end audience as much as they should. I think far too many people operate a spray and pray methodology where they just contact people at random and just pitch at them, hoping that someone might buy it. I don't think they're very selective. I think that they come at it from an angle of what's in it for me, and rather than what's in it for the customer. I mean, there's some of the things. There's probably more as well.
Yeah, I can imagine so. But now let's talk about something that most of us consider a swear word, telemarketers. I think out of everyone that I've seen commenting about them, I don't think anyone likes them other than you.
Oh, come on.
So what? I mean, I know this is a pretty obvious question, but what are they doing wrong? Why are they so hated?
I think it's some of the same things that I've alluded to. I think there's a whole set of things that go wrong with sort of telesales, telemarketing, cold calling. The first is acting like you have the right to speak to somebody. The second is thinking about what you want to say. The third is an emotional one driven by a fear. They fear that they're taking up your time. And sorry, when I say they, I'm not talking about all of them. I'm talking about some. But they fear that they're taking up your time. And in order to deal with that and not have a negative thing happen, which is you hang up, they then feel that the only way to handle that is to rattle off their pitch at a lightning rate. So that creates quite a bad experience. I think the whole mindset that a lot of people go into a cold call with is fundamentally wrong, which means that it becomes a nuisance thing rather than a kind of parity thing. I think if people can position themselves as an expert on, and in fact become an expert on the area that they're approaching people about, and contact people with a genuine interest in solving a problem or pain that that person has, and being aware that that person, because of who they are, is likely to experience that pain, I think people's perception of telemarketing and telesales will be fundamentally different. If, for example, you were to contact somebody who was, I don't know, a landscape gardener, for example, and you know that you've produced a landscape gardening spreadsheet that has been used by every single landscape gardener that you've come across, and they have found it incredibly useful because it's helped them work out how much lawn seed they need, how much fertilizer they need, it's helped them work out their gross profit, it's helped them work out this and that. If you were to then contact a landscape gardener and say, Richard, look, I'm keen to grab a moment of your time at some point and tell you a little bit about how we're helping people like you, landscape gardeners. Have you got a couple of minutes sometime? There's already a little bit of intrigue there. there's already a high level of relevance there. And I think those two things are often lacking: relevance, interest, and also there was some respect there, because I asked you when was a good time. So I think relevance, intrigue, and respect are things that are often lacking in the telemarketing and telesales calls that people don't like.
Because I think one of the problems with the telesales that I find is that, I mean, it's a problem that's brought about by something that I think inherently is good, but it's just become an issue, and that is structure and process. Now, I'm all for structure in the business. I'm all for processes. I'm all for monitoring that. I'm all for knowing what your game plan is and initiating it. So I don't have a problem with the structure and the process behind cold calling. But sometimes I feel that you need to find that balance between following the structure and actually understanding and being helpful. And I find those two often don't go hand in hand. If I ask someone a question, they're not listening to what I'm asking. They're looking at what solutions they've got that best fit what I'm asking. And it never quite fits.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a misunderstanding of what they need to be doing. You know, really, I think a cold call should be about speaking to somebody, getting to sort of understand whether they experience some of the pains and problems that other people like them experience, or other people in the same line of work experience. Creating a forum between the two of you where you can actually have a meaningful discussion about the pains and problems that they experience that you might be able to help with is the way the conversation should want to go, rather than, oh, do you want to buy A? No. Do you want to buy B? No. Do you want to buy C? No. What about D? Does that that's a bit different. Do you fancy that? It should be much more about creating an environment where you can have an honest and open discussion about, well, these are the sorts of things that we help with. Are any of those situations that you experience? Well, yeah, we did have that problem with this, with that situation last year. Okay, great. What were you doing? Questioning but the mindset has to be right. The mindset has to be, I want to help the person that I'm calling, rather than I want to sell them some stuff. And I think that's the issue with a lot of sales, is it's, I want to sell anybody my product rather than I actually actively want to help somebody.
So do you think this comes down to a lack of training? Do you think it comes down to a lack of product knowledge? Do you think it comes down to targets and things that the cold callers are facing? Or is it just a combination of all of those things that drives this?
I think it's all of those things, which is driven by culture. So if the organization doesn't, it's got a choice. It can either employ people to just call people up and make random calls to as many people as it can in the hope that somebody might buy, or it can actually actively want to help people to benefit from its solutions, and then target people who will actually benefit or who are prone to benefit. So I think it's all of the above. I think it's all of those things that you mentioned, but I think those things are symptoms rather than causes.
Because, I mean, I'm just wondering as well as to what negative impact bad sales have. Because you see so many posts on LinkedIn about people moaning about this person who's contacted them through cold calling and did it in such an awful way. And I'm just wondering, if you do adopt that attitude of contact as many people as you can and hope for the best, what kind of effect that'll have on your brand?
I think it decimates brand. I think the problem is that a lot of people aren't worried about brand because a lot of people are short-termist. A lot of people are very focused on, I need to hit this target this week, this month, this quarter, this year. I need to do this, I mean, don't get me started on this because I will. But I think that's a problem in life. I think that's a problem in politics. I think that's a problem in society. I think that's a problem in the world. It's why global warming is a problem, probably, because people are focused on the short term. Yeah, but that's a much bigger conversation.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we had a conversation about where the world's problems come from, I think it's exactly that. Let's just look a little bit further and a little bit wider as far as selling is concerned. Now, there's a word that I'm not a particularly big fan of because it's way overused, and that is holistic. I think people use it for everything, but I think when it comes to sales, it is quite important to have an holistic approach in sales. All your client contact points need to be sending the same message, don't they?
I think they need to be sending the same underlying message, but they may want Yeah, I think you need to think holistically. Yeah, that's the first part of that question. I guess you need to think: does what I'm saying on the phone, is that backed up by the collateral that I'm sending? Is that backed up by my website? Is that backed up by what my clients say about me? Is that what backed up by what my Google reviews say about me? Is that the same as my YouTube video? Yeah, there needs to be that holistic approach. But I think there's also a thing about tailoring what you say to depending on who you're saying it to, because a lot of businesses have different audiences. So you're not going to say the same thing to a florist as you are to a landscape gardener, as you are to a accountant, as you are to a quantity surveyor, probably in relation to your spreadsheets, because they have different needs. And also how you talk to people probably varies on what channel you're using. So whether you're using phone, whether you're using email, whether you're in some sort of social media, I imagine the way that you would communicate, and I'm not a marketing specialist, but the way that you would communicate in Instagram, might be very different than the way you communicate in a formal business email. But ultimately, the underlying message, I guess, needs to be they need to support each other.
Yeah, very briefly, John, can you explain to us how you actually help, you and your company help businesses on the sales front?
Yeah, so we tend to help business owners, managers, directors with business development strategy, business development direction. It might be that they've got a problem that they're aware of and they need somebody to come in and fix it. So they might need their sales team training or their cold calling staff training. It might be that they're not aware of a problem and they know they've got a problem, but they're not really sure where it sits. Then we can go in and we can sit with them and we can do an audit. We can go through their various process and really get to the bottom of things and help them optimize and improve. So primarily it's helping business owners and directors to solve problems in their sales or business development process or journey, and in helping their sales staff to become better at outreaching to people on the phone, via email, through LinkedIn, and all the stuff that goes alongside that. So systems, process, technology, and anything else that seems pertinent, positioning, messaging, all that stuff.
I often hear the phrase when it comes to sales that it's just a numbers game. My question, if you look at it from a logical point of view, is if you're trying something and you're doing some kind of sales approach and you're not getting, you're getting sales, but you're not getting quite what you want, at what point do you adjust that sales process, or do you just keep going because eventually you're going to get a breakthrough? I mean, how do you know when you're on the right track, but you just got to push harder? And how do you know when you need to change tracks?
I think it depends whether your data is quantitative or qualitative. Whether your data is numbered or information led. So I think if you do one call to somebody who is the profile of person that you're trying to reach, and they give you some very valuable feedback in words, not numbers. I'm not going to try and say any words beginning with Q. Then you'll get a very good sense straight away of, oh, I can see that when I use this word, it doesn't land. Now that's the great thing about cold calling and direct contact, whether that be face to face or whatever, is you get feedback. You can send 500 emails and look at the open rate and go, oh, that's a good open rate. And then you could look at the reply rate and go, oh, that's quite good. But you might not get any real quality feedback, feedback that actually tells you what you need to do differently. So people might say, oh, no, I'm not interested. People might say, oh, no, now's not the right time. So I think it depends what channel you're talking about. I guess with email, you probably have to be in the hundreds for it to be statistically accurate to make an assessment as to whether the open rate is decent and the reply rate is good and the interested rate is good. I think on more human channels or more communicative channels, you can probably get much deeper insights from fewer interactions. I don't know if that answers your question though.
No, well, it doesn't mean, look, I would like to assume that if people get some constructive feedback from particular clients saying, well, because you said this, that put me off, that kind of thing, I'd like to assume that they would take note of that and actually make some changes. Well, what I find, because I've made a lot of spreadsheets for people to actually monitor things like cold calls, so put down the results of each cold call, based on the different calls, and actually see which ones bring you more success at the end of the day. Because even if you're not necessarily asking the client or they're not giving you specific feedback, you can still judge by the numbers as to which approach is working. But I find it quite surprising how so few people seem to do that. It's just a case of, well, that's our sales script, get cracking. And they don't really assess the numbers afterwards.
Yeah, I think you know, your first part of your question was what you hear it's a numbers game, and I think there is an element of it being a numbers game. I think if you speak to nobody, if you communicate with nobody, you're going to sell nothing. If you speak to lots of people, you know, and quantity is the focus, you can suffer on the quality side. And I do think that you need to look at the stats, look at the information that you're getting back, and make like intelligent decisions about what you're going to do with that, and then make those changes. But to me, I think sales is a business of. I think some people will say to you, "Oh, it's a process and a numbers game," and I think it is a blend of both science and art. And I think you need to look at it from both perspectives. You need to look at it from a scientific standpoint, i.e., what is the, you know, if we do A and we do B and they take similar amounts of time and money, which one of those two things is landing best? So, you know, basically an A/B test, but also look at it from an art standpoint and say, okay, so on the A/B test, we have much less engagement, but the quality of the engagement that we have is much higher. Or instinctively, I feel that the engagement we've had from the activity A that we've done is going to pay off in the long term, even if it's not in the short term. So I think you just need to blend the two.
Mm. And also, I think there's an element. I think one of the things I've struggled with in selling is I've always most of the sales I've done in my lifetime has been internal sales, not external sales. So I haven't necessarily gone to the client. The client's always come to me.
Right, I see what you mean.
I'm still way more comfortable if someone approaches me, engaging and helping them, because then I see they've come to me for a reason, and if I can give them a solution, I will do. I still feel very uncomfortable approaching someone who hasn't come to me first. And I think there's probably an element to all of us, the way we like to be approached, the way we want to be approached. We often approach others, but that's not necessarily the way they want to be approached. I mean, I know for me, I don't respond well to cold callers, however good or professional they are. I just don't like it. But when I discover I need something and I call them, then I want them to have the answers, and sometimes obviously they don't, and that also upsets me. But you've got to almost take your emotions out of it, don't you? And actually look at how your clients would want, or your potential clients would want to be approached.
Yes, and I think also there's another element, which is, you know, I think you need to be respectful of how people want to be approached. Obviously, that's key. But going against everything I've said, there's also a sort of looking at it from your own standpoint. Not the problem, but one of the challenges with relying on inbound is that no matter how good your methodology for getting those people there, whether it be Google ads or social media or Facebook ads, or, you know, whatever you're using to land people, or content marketing or whatever, you're still reliant on which people decide to get in touch with you. The sort of approach that I've adopted over the years, the kind of outbound cold calling or cold emailing, all that stuff, I can laser pinpoint people that we want to work with and target them directly. And if it's done in the right way, start a relationship with the people who actually matter. So, you know, I think anyone who's done the kind of inbound thing, you know, I think you're going to get people contact you where there's just not a match. And I think if you do it the other way, and I'm not saying do one or the other, I think both have their merits and should probably be used together. You can go directly to the people that you want to go to. So I had a client a few years back when we were doing kind of you know, lead generation in our for a client, and they wanted to get into 6 big companies, 6, I think, FTSE 100 companies, who they've been trying to get into for 6 years. They wanted to speak to really senior people in those businesses, so like CEO, other C-level people. They couldn't do it. They'd tried, they'd written emails, they'd done this, they'd done that. Those people were never going to find this company. They just weren't going to find them. But we sat down, went through all the material that they'd generated over time to these people, and managed to get them into every single one of those clients, every single one of those 6 clients, just by breaking down what they had, looking at who they wanted to get in touch with, and then creating an approach that would actually resonate with the person who was going to receive it. So I don't think that particularly answers your question, but I think, yes, you need to think, to answer your question, yes, you need to think about how your audience wants to be approached, but you also need to be a little bit selfish and think, well, if I can help that person, and I really need to reach them, I can't necessarily rely on the fact that they're just going to come to me.
Well, I mean, as you're speaking, I was thinking about why am I so anti cold callers? And I think the reason why I'm anti them is because I don't think I've ever been approached by someone who actually knows what I do.
Right.
And if I actually got a call from someone saying, listen, we understand what you do. We've looked at your website. We know what you're trying to sell. We know how you're trying to do it. And actually, we've got a product that showcases products like yours, whatever. If I weren't interested, I would still be polite. I would still listen to what they had to say. I would still consider it, because I think if they understand me and they think it could work, I need to at least hear what they have to say. The problem is so many calls. I'll get someone contact me saying, we provide software solutions to businesses like yours. I go, what kind of software? And they're selling me, excuse me, the very thing I'm selling. And I'm going, why would I buy yours when I make that? Obviously you get the good old, we hear you were in a car accident. No, I wasn't. You're just fishing. Those kind of things. And that puts people off, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this stuff is like very low level. This is what I've been trying to fight against over the past few years, and the thing I've been telling people not to get involved with, not to do over these past few years. The thing that like sullies the image and reputation of what is. I mean, ultimately, what we're talking about when we talk about cold calling or when we talk about calling is connecting with somebody on a human level and starting a relationship. If you do, if I rang you tomorrow on behalf of a industry body, I found that you had a spreadsheet for, I don't know, let's go back to my landscape gardeners, and I'm a part of an industry body that represents. I've got 5,000 landscape gardener members. I found your landscape gardening spreadsheet. I think it's brilliant. And I ring you up and I say, hi, Richard, I've seen your landscape gardening spreadsheet. I think it's brilliant. I think it would really help each one of our members. We've got 5,000 landscape gardener members, and I'd like each of them to see it. I think your reception would be very, very different. And, maybe it's a distinction between the word cold calling and not, excuse me. But I think it goes back to my point about relevance and respect and intrigue and just the way that someone approaches you.
Yeah, I think that's true, because I mean one of the telltale signs I see specifically in emails, because I'll probably get as it does everyone else, 2 or 3 emails saying we can sell you this. Do you want to buy that? And as soon as, because my business is trading as Spreadsheet Solutions, but the actual business name is something different. It's Suncore Limited. So what happens is, as soon as I get an email saying, dear Richard at Suncore Limited, I switch off, because they don't know what I'm doing. Because any human being who's gone and looked at what I'm branded and what I'm promoting and what's on the social media, and anyone who knows what I do, most of my clients don't even know that it's Suncore Limited, and they don't really care. But the ones who have gone online and found some kind of register and gone, let's just email everyone and whack that in because that seems like what they do. Then I know that it's not a personalized approach. And I think obviously that's what's giving the cold calling a bad name, is that kind of a shotgun approach.
It's the same with every single business, social media marketing. There'll be 90% of people who are doing it terribly. Cold calling, there'll be 90% of people that are doing it terribly. Google Ads. There'll be 90% of people that are doing it terribly. And maybe it's more than 90, I don't know. Spreadsheets. I'm sure you can buy a terrible, terrible spreadsheet from all sorts of places that doesn't really do what it's supposed to do, breaks when you do certain things, has no... Every product or service has accountants. Don't get me started on accountants. Honestly, it's not a good situation. Every product or service is full of people who, every sector rather, is full of people who don't do a good job. The difference is with cold calling is that the entry requirements are much lower than it might be for, say, spreadsheets or spreadsheet creation or accountancy or something like that. Accountancy, you have to do an AAT qualification or an ACCA, CA, whatever it is, qualification. Spreadsheet, you need to be able to navigate your way around a sheet, write formulas, so on and so forth. Most people, by the age of, I don't know, 4, have the ability to pick up a phone and speak. So that's you qualified. What it ignores is all the other attributes that actually make you really, really good at doing cold calling. So I think industries are full of rubbish people. Not everyone, obviously.
Yeah.
But the difference is with cold calling is that the barriers to entry are incredibly low. So it means that you get a disproportionately high level of poor experience.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. One final question, John. Any tips that you may have for people in frontline sales?
Think. No, I was going to leave it there, but no, think about who is it you're calling? What do they care about? Why would they listen to you? What makes you different, unusual? What makes your business interesting to them? What might they be doing when you contact them, whether by email or by phone? What will make them listen? What will make you stand out from everyone else in the crowd? I think just think about things from the other person's angle and think about who you're calling. You know, where's that list come from? I mean, not everyone has this luxury. Some people are sat in call centers with auto dialers calling. I mean, I think about 16 calls yesterday about my energy supply in the office. So I've obviously got onto a list somewhere. And I said to one of the guys, he started the call with, "All right, mate, how's it going?" And I said, "Yeah, it's fine, thanks. How are you?" And we carried on. He was quite a nice guy. I said, where have you got this list from? I said, because I've been inundated by these calls today. And it would be good if the person who's supplying you this data understands that this is a shared office that they've called. There is no, control over the gas or electric supply. And he said, I'm just sat in a call center. An auto dialer just randomly calls people up, and I start talking to them. What can that guy do? He hasn't got a lot of choice about who he speaks to or how he speaks to them, really. I mean, he can decide how he speaks to them to a certain degree, I guess. But so I think if you've got the power to control who you call, how you call them, and all that stuff, then just have a think and make sure that when you do it, you're doing it on a higher level. And ask yourself, are you doing it out of service because you want to help the person, or are you doing it out of selling because you just want to sell them some stuff?
Because I mean, as you would know, I mean, when I first met you, my website was a lot different to what it is now, and I was getting the message out through social media and various other places, and people were visiting the website, and I was losing people when they got to the website because the website was way too confusing and all sorts of stuff all over the place. And I think that's when I actually started to consider when I say selling, whether you're selling directly or indirectly, it makes no difference. If people find you a website or your marketing or you call them or whatever, the bottom line is when I came to my own website, looking at it as if I were a potential client, I started seeing a lot of issues that I never saw before when I looked at it as far as and I think what often happens is because we're so we're so into our own business, and we know all the jargon and we know all the technical stuff, and we want to show off a little bit and show how much we know. We forget that the person buying from us doesn't really care less. I mean, people contact me, they don't care whether I'm using pivot tables, formulas, or array formulas. It makes no difference to them as long as it does the job. But what happens is, I think a lot of people get into their little bubble of what they're doing, and obviously don't look at it from the client's point of view. How would they like to, how would they like us to deal with this? And I think that goes across the board from marketing to, I mean, I've read some marketing posts on LinkedIn. I don't understand a word of it. And you kind of go, if you're gearing that for me, I've missed it, because you're talking nonsense. And I think that same kind of thing it's throughout all different sales, and it's something we need to read. A lot of businesses, I think, need to address.
Yeah, I mean, I've got we work with quite a lot of technical businesses, and I think technical people, people who do sort of software or technology, or they're some sort of high level thinker, and a lot of technical people, I think, struggle to communicate on a level that their average buyer understands. They will tend to say, I've got one client in particular, they're great, but their website was literally full of all the languages, the coding languages they use, the technology they use, so on and so forth. And they were trying to sell to a sort of a specific role that was non-technical, but their only buyers were technical people, because no one else understood what they were saying. And they didn't realize that until I pointed it out to them. I said, look, you're not selling to non-technical people, because no one non-technical would stay on your website, because they just won't understand what you're talking about. You've written this from a technical perspective, which makes it highly pertinent to a technical audience. That's why you keep getting work from the technical people, not from the ones you want.
I mean, my brother recently set up his business doing software creation, so writing software packages, that kind of thing. And he was very proudly showing up his website, and I looked at him and I said to him, are you trying to sell this to businesses who need software, or are you trying to get people to come and work for you, so software developers to come and subcontract for you? And he said, well, both. I said, well, you need to split that up. You need to have one site, or one, at least if you've got one website, at least one part of that website for people coming looking to get a job with you, and another part for your clients. Because I said, I've read through your opening paragraph on your homepage, and you've immediately delved into what languages you're programming with and all the rest of it. And I, as a client, don't care. Someone who's programming would need to know that, but the client doesn't need to know that, and you've lost them already. And he kind of went around and reshuffled that. But it's those kind of things that a few years back I was doing myself, and it's a very easy trap to fall into. And as you say, the technical people, but also others. I mean, if you think, you go back to the gardener and the florist, if that landscaper goes on about all the different fertilizers that they use and what kind of tools they use, it doesn't mean anything. All I want to know is that the place is going to look pretty once you're done.
Yeah. And I'm guilty of this. If you look at our website, I'm sure it's awful, because it's really hard to do it for yourself. It's really hard to get an objective perspective on something when you're in it. It's just human nature, and I think that's why some businesses engage with people like me, is because we can come in and ask them a load of questions that they just hadn't thought to ask themselves, or really can't ask themselves, and then provide an alternative perspective, and that's quite valuable. It doesn't have to be someone you pay money to. You haven't got it could be another friend who's got a business, so you could perhaps help me out, I can help you out, or it could be someone you meet through a networking group, or it could be it doesn't have to be a paid for thing, but I just think it's good to get that really honest feedback from somebody, and those difficult questions asked from somebody, in order that you can just do things a bit better.
Definitely. Well, John, thank you very much for your time. I think that's all we've got time for in this episode. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me along.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.